I must say, I think that Sunday mornings are my favourite time of the week, especially when it's weather like we've got at the moment. Quite nice. Promises to be a nice day, but I can already see that clouds are building up. So who knows? Who knows what the weather's going to do? At this time of the year, I need to do a lot more walking around and videoing so that you can see just how far grassy bottom has come on, because things move on really quickly at this time of year, and before you know it, a plant's flowered and gone by the time you've got back to it. That's why I do so much filming. I'm doing all this to guide people, really, guide them and show them what's possible in their own gardens. This is the cloister pergola, and it's quite a structure in itself. It started off quite small, really. In fact, let's show you while we're here. It started off with just that little section there. So that bit and that bit were the only two little bits there, and that was done to kind of start the segregation or separation of different borders. One thing you must do when you've got a large patch of grass is, I would suggest that right in the middle of that patch you get your spade out and you dig a massive border straight away. Don't even think about it, just do it. Shape, size can all be changed over time, but just get it segregated, separated. It definitely works. That's what I was doing here. So when I put the cloister pergola up, as I said, it was just that little bit there, and then I just tagged on and I moved on to this section then, and then built the rest of it. And it was just a natural progression of making a garden. And then ideas, fresh ideas come to you once you start one process. One process leads on to another process. That's what it does with me. The polo, as one of my American viewers said, what's the polo? She thought it might be something to do with the game polo, what's done on horses. It's not. It's the polo mint in the UK. And apparently in America they have something very similar. So that's why I named it that, because it's the shape of a polo. It's as simple as that. And I do try and name everything in the garden, just so it's easier to explain areas once we get to them. That's the Carl Forster border, which was originally the longer border. And it became a really long border because it reached up to the shack. But it's now dissected by different things, so it's no longer appropriate. So I changed its name. So that is now the Carl Forster border. Well, it was always the Carl Forster border that became part of the longer border. Now I'm going to do a little bit more of a in-depth talk when I get to that section, just to explain a few more things, because I've had somebody contact me who is a bit unsure of it, why it's doing a certain thing. So we'll explain more when we get back to that. We'll do that later in the video, so just stick around for that. So remember, I put this window in so that we would get the different views, and eventually all this growth would actually cover all this. I could have done this simply by putting more wood in and blocked your view completely, but that's not very interesting when you do that, so it's better to do this. It's doing quite well now as well. Some of the roses need a little bit of attention, as you can see, and I'm always pottering about with them. I'm always pruning bits, and it's just an ongoing process that you've just got to keep doing. So if I sit down here, just ignore the blue plant pot there, but if you look at that, this is the whole purpose of doing this, was that view there. And eventually, once all this growth takes over up there as well, it's going to be very secluded, this area, and it's sure to become one of my favourite sections. But it already is, to be quite honest. Some of the roses are really past the best now. The ones I've got actually are repeat flowerers, so although they look like they're on the way out, there will be more blooms appearing at some point. I don't usually sit in here and talk about that silver birch, but that's the view from this side. So in the cloister pergola, that's the view we get. And it's sat inside that sheep bale feeder. And as previously mentioned, for no other reason than to give it some sort of a focus. Just looks nice. It's what I like to do. I like to put in the more unusual. And that's just what I've done there. And it does look good. It's not there to contain it, just there to look good. This is looking nice. This is Persicaria, and it's a Persicaria called Blackfield. It's a really nice one. There's several other varieties of that particular one as well, but I really like that one. And it has a deep red leaning towards the black side of red, hence Blackfield. And it's a very, very strong plant. It hasn't set its seeds yet. I'm looking for them, but I can't see any yet. Or flower heads. Seeds will be set after the flower heads. So the flowers look really nice. It's a typical Persicaria type looking one. So they won't be long before they make some sort of an appearance. I don't think I've ever really paid much attention to these planters. I've just kind of dotted things in that were appropriate at the time. I've got a couple of ferns here. And this one is an aphrium called Dre's Dagger. It's really nice actually. It's letting me down a little bit because I seem to remember I bought this because it had this almost red stem, which it's kind of got, but it's more brown than red now. Maybe the young growth is what I should be looking at. And then behind it, I've got Aphrium Ghost, which is suffering a little bit because it really does like a shady area, which it's got here, but not as shady as it's going to be in the future. So it's getting a little bit of sunburn, a little bit of scorch, and a little bit of drying out. But I can't keep on top of everything at Grassy Bottom. It's not possible. Ah, look at this. Look at this. There's a Eupatorium. So that Eupatorium has to be off Glut Ball, because Glut Ball was just the other side over there and still remains there actually. It's there. So what I'll do, where's it growing? Oh, it's growing inside that pipe. So I just simply drop these little bits of pipe, which were for the original cow drinker. They were on the outside, them little pipes, and they took the water out. And it's managed to plonk itself in. Yeah. So that is, although it may not be anything spectacular, it's definitely worth taking it out and putting it in a plant pot and seeing what it develops into. And if all I do is sell it at some point, then that's fine. Somebody else gets to enjoy the beauty. I bought this Spirea this year, and it's called Spirea hayatana, and it's new to me, so I'm reading off that label. It's quite interesting seed heads actually. They're quite nice. They've already gone over. I'm sure it will produce similar ones. What size does that get? Because it's new to me, I don't know. It takes full sun off part shade, and it is hardy, fully hardy as well. Doesn't really say. Oh, there we go. 80 to 100 centimetres. Now I'm not sure what size that is in inches, but I would say that's going to make probably 2 foot. Probably. I'll probably be wrong, but I think that's what it'll make. Got all the bits and bobs here. Got the Brunera, which I still don't know which one that one is. I can't find the label. I've got several, and I really need to get in the habit of actually, you know, keeping those labels. You have to. So from time to time, we need to do a little bit of clearing up, take off some of the dead leaves, just to keep it tidy. This looks good, and it's been good from day one. Always looks good from the beginning. It has a really nice looking flower, and it's a nettle, a dead nettle, and I've shown it many times, and for a good reason, because it continues to look good. We're now in the first week in July, and it just looks superb. It's a very strong plant. A very strong plant. You can see how big it's actually got. And that's a lamium, and that's Lamium orvala. And it looks like it might sting you, but it won't. Hence the name dead nettle. Now, we showed this plant on the last one. This is the Cortaderia Patagonia. And it's gone past that rusty phase now, and it's taken on a more usual looking pampas look. And although those seed heads are about 6.5, 7 feet now, I still rate them. I still think they're brilliant. And it is a smaller and a dwarfing type of pampas. That's very nice. And I always say this is on the bluer side of green, and it is. It's more a silver blue. Or a grey blue, I think, actually. Looking at that now, that's more of a grey blue. But it's very nice. And I think you can pick out some of those as well. That Ligustitium still looks good. It's now starting to set its seeds. And you can see that that one is more white. That's quite newly out. Whereas the one here is a bit older. So that's setting seed. And it's monocarpic, so it's going to die after this. I think this particular one has taken 3 years to get to this stage. And that can be anything from 2 to 3 years on these particular types. They do look good. I made this bin, or rather butchered this bin, and I call it Franken bin, after Frankenstein, obviously. And I quite like it, and for no other reason than it's got an unusual look. Just quite like it. It's quirky. And I keep this Millennia in. And this Millennia will end up looking really, really nice. It was fantastic last year. It had some lovely colours. And it's called Millennia Le Pont de Say. A really nice one. Only failing, it does sprawl out. But last year it didn't. It stayed upright. I don't know how I managed to do that, because it is only sat in its plant pot in there. So there's nothing really supporting it, but it did quite well. So maybe that's the answer, to put it into one of those. This area is doing really well now. Very happy with this area. So these were originally for feeding the cows, but I've turned them into planters, as you do. And I've got some nice plants in these. This is a nice hosta, if you can see, if I can get my actual shadow out of the way. And this one's called Blue Arrow, and it's really nice. I like it a lot. I like the shape of it. I've got quite a lot of hostas in this area, and I tend to keep most of them. I've got probably 95% of my hostas are in pots, so that I can keep the slugs and snails away. Quite a lot. I'm not going to go into them because there's just too many of them to name, and just too many. That's it, too many. The floating deck. That floating deck looks brilliant on a day like today. We spend loads of time sat drinking tea on there. And as you can see from the background, there's the Calamagrostis looking great. Look at it. That's why you should get it, for that blowy effect. It's very nice. So the floating deck actually sits on the long border. And it is now dissected, but it's still a full border, so that I keep the name the long border. This Cirsium is now starting to come into its own. In fact, let's get closer. Let's hope I don't break my neck jumping off this little wall. So the bees love it, as you can see. And this is called Cirsium Mount Etna. A more unusual Cirsium. But very nice nevertheless. And very strong, very clump forming, but very strong. Well, it is till the point when them flowers go over, and then it kind of almost collapses on itself. And what I'll do at that point is I'll chop the whole thing down, and we will get some more flowers. Not as many, you never do, but it will remain nice. That looks great, doesn't it, from there? And down there to the dip pools, the wildlife dip pools. I call them dip pools rather than a pond, because they're not really a pond. Although at times they do become a pond when that middle section gets immersed in water. When we get loads of rain, it just fills up completely, and it is almost just a single pond. But I call them the wildlife dip pools, and they look great through that pampas. And then at the back there, that building you can see at the back, that's called the shack. That's been there almost from the start when I built it. It was a true build of passion, and I've even insulated the inside. It's very nice. Pull one or two weeds out while I'm at it, while I walk around. When I walk around on these talks, you might hear me going quiet from time to time. That's because I'm usually bending over pulling out weeds. This is the gravel area. I've always liked this area since I actually put it in here. I try and remember the time before it was a gravel area, when it was just grass, and it was just grass. The whole section was grass. In fact, the border here was the only border really that existed, apart from one on the long border, which was a tiny, skinny, probably 1 foot wide, and so was this. And it ran down the side of the wall, which you can probably just make out there. And it runs up there for about 20 feet, and they had a tiny little border at this end. But I wanted to make it bigger. So if you're going to build yourself a border, try to make it at least 6 feet deep if you've got the space. Don't be scared if you've got a small garden and you've got enough room to create that 6 feet. Do it. It pays dividends. So that inula, and that's Inula uckerii, the yellow one in the background there, that was one of the only plants here, along with the geranium there, which is Max Frey. They were both here at the time, and I've allowed them to stay. Epimerum, and it's coming out now. It needs about another week before it gets into its best. But the flowers are finally starting to come out. Very small, very nice. That's looking good. It is a clump former and has a tendency to seed around itself, but you can put up with that, you just pull the seeds out. That Ilotalapheme is a seedling off of Matrona. Looks very nice. I kept it because it showed promise, and it still does. And then behind that we got Catananci. I'm mentioning that again because it's in full flower, and in the mornings they tend to open the flowers more than they do in the afternoon. You come back in the afternoon, a lot of those will be gone. They'll have closed up. And a few plants actually do that, and that's one of them. There's 3 plants in there I planted, but I feel that they need to be moved. They need to go into a better location. They need to be in a more sort of area where there's taller grasses, because they would help to support them, because they can be a little bit floppy, as you can see, and we get a lot of wind blowing through this section of the border. There are grasses here, and it's why I actually planted it here. There's a grass to the left there you can see, which is a miscanthus, not there yet, and behind it there's Cecilaria nitida, but that's a small grass, so that don't really give it any support. But the other plants I've put in should give it plenty of support. This Solanum wallichianum always looks good from the moment it comes up. Very ferny, very leafy look to it at this time, and well, they all are, aren't they, at this time? And then it sends up this wonderful dome-shaped creamy white flower, and it'll be setting those now. It should make another foot, maybe 1.5 foot, who knows, this year, because they only got put in there last year, so we've got to give them time. But just on its own, that's a real beauty. Oh look, there's another weed. That's what I do. I go through and I pull them. There's more than this one, but we'll pull this one out for now. That whitey looking flower there, where is it there? That's a beauty. That's new to me this year. See if I can get over to it without crushing everything. I don't want to crush that Solanum, so I'm going to have to walk around to it. And it's a lovely plant. Fight my way through here. And we'll talk about this one because it's really nice. I really like it. And believe it or not, that's a Nepeta. And that's Nepeta nuda, N-U-D-A. and it's quite nice. It's a very small plant at the moment. I got this one from up at Yorkgate Gardens, where it looked quite interesting. Well, I say it looked quite interesting. It was just a set of leaves at that point, but it sounded quite interesting. So I bought it. And it does look good. I quite like it. Very small flowers. Very small flowers. I look forward to a couple of years' time when that will have got itself going a bit more and will be more clumpy. And it'll look better at that point. This is Persicaria. The variety is Red Dragon. Always looks interesting. What it's good at is actually pushing its way up through other plants, sprawling through them, and showing all those leaves off. So it's good. And then the flowers appear and then it dies back. But when it dies back, it'll die back into that central clump. So it's never going to cause a problem. Some people fear these ones. They think they're going to be spreaders, and they're not spreaders then. They will just die back into the clump. Still a bit early to be showing you the miscanthus. But that is a very nice miscanthus, that one. It's a miscanthus called Chayugensis. It has a very congested leaf there. They're all different types of miscanthus, which I will show you at some point, but there's a good example here. So that's congested. And then the one there in the background, that's not. That's a very fine looking miscanthus indeed, and that's named after Beth Chatto. So it's Miscanthus sinensis Beth Chatto. Very nice one. I like this one though. I really do like this one. I like it because of that leaf colour. That leaf colour exists almost from the beginning. As soon as it pushes up, starts a little bit green, and then it suddenly turns into this colour. It's only failing, as far as I'm aware at the minute, is it's not very fast. It's a bit slow. I'd like to propagate that and get more of it. But it's just too slow. And I put it in that area because I wanted it to match up to this little Pittosporum, which is Tom Thumb. You can see it's now going back to black. It has these green leaves as they grow fresh, and then it slowly turns back to that colour. Very nice. So I coupled it up with that and the Ilotelephane behind it, which is looking really nice now. And that's Ilotelephane Carfunkelstein, which is a really nice dark-leaved one. And that can almost be green when it first comes up. But a little bit of patience, and we get this. And all the ones I've got here, which are several in the garden, all come from the original plant because they're very easy to take cuttings from. And probably a couple of years back on the YouTube, I did a video on how to take those, so you would have to want that out. I'd like to point you in that direction on film, but I don't know how to do it. Technically, I'm not good enough at doing that sort of thing, so I'll leave that to the experts. But there's another one here. I think there's about 3 plants in there, which are good. Looking nice. And then the box edge. So that's Buxus sempervirens. All my box edging is Buxus sempervirens here. We don't really suffer with box blight this far north, or the box moth, or the box caterpillar. We don't really suffer it. Not yet anyway. They've not found my garden just yet, but they may do. I might come out tomorrow. They might have stripped the whole lot. Might be dead. But unlikely. These balls, I bought these quite mature, these box balls, because I wanted to have some sort of form of structure looking good, because creating just the odd one here and there can often really make the garden look good. And the intention for these are that they're going to knit together, which they are doing now, because there's 3 separate ones here, and then I'm going to do a cloud pruning on them, but more of a lumpy cloud pruning rather than distinctive cloud pruning. You can see I'm allowing them all to join up, so over time they're going to look fantastic. That Lamus looks brilliant, but it's one I would never let out in the garden because it is a runner. Very successful, that one, but it is a runner, and you'll find it everywhere if you put that in. So don't make the mistake. Do what I've done here, which is putting this rusty looking oil, well, what would that have been? A 40-gallon drum. So a 40-gallon oil drum. And it looks great in there. Especially when you look at it from this way here. So I'm always trying to create little scenes and little photo opportunities for people when they visit, because people really appreciate that. That Raponticum's looking brilliant now. It's going over now. A lot of the pink's gone. I think I showed it on the last video when there was quite a lot more pink, but they are slowly going, but it still looks good. And behind it, I've done a little bit of tidying up on this cloud pruning. I showed it on the last video, but it was looking a bit scruffy, a little bit unkempt. So I got the secateurs out and just trimmed that up a bit. I've been working on this one for 3 years now, and it's getting to that stage. And it's a Taxus baccata David. A bit more of an unusual choice to do a cloud pruning with, but it's very effective and it really does work. Very nice. But you've got to have patience to do these things. I mean, originally I had little sections of that, so a lot of that you can see there. There's what, 1, 2, 4 little branches leading off. Each one of those was a separate little bit, but now I've allowed them to build together and I'm making more interesting cloud formations. So they look really nice. This is Eryngium bulgatii and it's just starting to turn blue. Bulgatii is a really blue form. You can get some really nice blues as well, but this was grown from a seed. So I'm unsure as to whether it's going to have a really deep blue or a paler blue. I don't know. It's not there yet. It'll take about another 3 to 4 weeks for that to come into its full blueness. And then we can judge it at that point, see if we've picked a good one. And I know that flower arranges love this. And it is good. I mean, that's better than any of those little blousy flowers they tend to put in these arrangements. There are some good flower arrangers out there. And I like the ones that create weird combinations. Just stick one of those in and that'll have created the weird combination that I'm talking about. It has a lovely marbled leaf as well. And I grew several of this, and actually this is about the only one that's managed to survive. I don't know why, but it just has. The other ones didn't have that marble in, so I suspect they won't be, or wouldn't have been as nice as this one. Don't forget this is a dry area, so all the plants in this area are perfect for that. This is Eryngium agavifolium. Look at that, isn't that beautiful? Very, very spiky. So if you get this one, buyer beware. It's very spiky. It will seed true. That's the colour of its seed head. It's never going to change colour, or the flower head. And it won't change colour from that. That is what it is. It'll be no more and no less, but it is so spiky. But I love it. It's very architectural. So if you're looking for something to go close to your house, go for that one. It's a nice one. Dormia behind it. Harmonicum. He's looking fantastic. And it has this sort of splayed and falling down look, which it does at this time of year. Although having said that, that one there is looking pretty good. But it's been supported by that post. Another good reason for putting posts in. Wonderful. Verbena bonariensis are doing well. It looks good next to that asphodeline, that lumpy plant there, asphodeline lutea, which there's many of here, but it's gone past its best now. But the seed heads take on quite an interesting look. But Verbena bonariensis, yeah, looking great. Like it. Very popular plant, and rightly so. You can put that on its own as a single specimen, which I wouldn't recommend because it looks a bit sparse. But if you put it into flower borders, just let them seed around in flower borders, they can look very interesting indeed, because they will push themselves up and through all of those flowers and they won't mind. This is my driveway in. I've tried to make it look interesting, and it is looking interesting. So this is Feniculum vulgare purpureum, so the bronze fennel. You can still see there's little bits of bronze. I don't know if you can make that out, but there's still bits of bronze here. Looking good. And it's starting to set its yellow flowers, which are quite insignificant, but can actually look quite interesting at times. And I do like to have that one in. Now, people say that that is very spready and will seed everywhere. Well, I can tell you, I've had that one in there for best part of 4 years now. Only ever found 3 seedlings. But be careful, because in your own garden, maybe you have the perfect conditions for it to seed around. You've just got to be aware of them, and as soon as you find them, you just pull them when they're little. In fact, you're better off waiting till they get to about a couple of inches tall and then pulling them. They're a lot easier to pull at that point. That's looking nice now. That's lovely. That's Phlomis Italica. It really does look nice. I like it. It's not flowering yet. Won't be long. Take a look through there, because that's always a nice view. When I get people here, I guide them to this section and say, take a picture of that. And it looks so peaceful with that table and those chairs sat around. We do sit there quite a lot as well. Not enough. I don't have time, really. So the Cortaderia Richardii is looking really good. Look at that, against them blue skies and them billowing clouds. They look fantastic. That's about 9 foot now up in the air. I want more of those. I've got some splits and I'd like to take more of those, but this is a particular one from Bob Brown and it's a more upright form. Or supposedly. I'm not sure if that's right. I've seen some very upright forms, and remember, when these are small, when these are in their 2nd year as seedlings, they are very upright anyway. But they're worth having, but they will seed around. So again, buyer beware. But don't let that put you off. Don't ever let that sort of thing put you off, because every plant sets flowers and sets seeds. You're the gardener, you need to do something about that. You need to be on top of it. So that is the telegraph pole pergola. Look, rake over there. Can't get too close because you'll see the Japanese garden and I don't want you to. And that is there because I've got some gravel coming which will finalise that, or finalise the Japanese garden, so that I can then do a video on it and show you, because I know there's a lot of people out there want to actually see it. That post, I rescued it from out of a skip. And it's is it oak? Yeah, I think it's an oak post, that. And it'd been used, it'd gone past its useful life because the bottom was rotting. And I put it here, so it's in the gravel area, as you can see. And it just looks wonderful. And I tell people to do this all the time. Put things like this in, because that gives that section meaning and purpose and somewhere to rest the eye as well. So it's really nice. So don't ever be afraid to stick something like a post in the middle of a border. I do it all the time, and I never ever take off what's on them. I leave them. That is interesting. That's had a life. It's had a life, so it looks interesting. And it'll probably outsee me. I might have to chop the bottom off when it rots and it becomes a smaller post, but you know, nevertheless, it'll look great. So let's avoid showing you the Japanese style border. I'm walking backwards now. Well, mind you, that's a nice scene, isn't it? Look at that. Quite nice, that. I like it. In fact, we'll look at this bit as well while we're here. So again, that pergola helps to set off this section. Looks really good. Wonderful. That plant pot, I made that. Well, it's a plant container, really. And I made that. Looks good. I do that sort of thing. This is a Veronicastrum. This is Veronicastrum virginicum. And I don't know if many people are, well, there's lots of people aware of it, but I don't think everybody's aware of this. Its common name is Culver's root. Don't know why, Culver's root. Doesn't make no sense to me. Maybe I'll Google that and see what it says. But it's very nice, and it has that lovely spire look. Look at those, they're wonderful. I mean, this is a 2.5-year-old plant now, 3 maybe. And we don't know what it's called because my friend typically lost the label. A different friend this time. All my friends seem to lose their labels. They're not very good at keeping them. I'm trying to focus in for you there. So give it a second and it'll focus. Or it won't focus. Yeah, it's decided not to. Anyway, we'll try this one. Kind of focusing. We'll not waste too much time on that. But you can see the overall look. It looks fantastic. So I'm in the half shady border here. And we have yet more spires. Yet more spires. And this one is a digitalis called Stuartii. So Stuart with 2 eyes at the end. Not flowering yet, but he's setting the flowers now. It's going to look wonderful. I've got loads of them. I let these seed around. This was the original plant. I've taken many, many seedlings from that. Before we forget, let's show you this. Well, this is the new area, as you know. I've yet to go through it. In fact, when I finish filming this, I'm going to get rid of all those weeds. So I've got some people coming to look at the garden this week and some next week, and I need to pretend that I'm a good gardener. But that euphorbia that I said to the lady I thought it was a different variety and would be a runner, turned out not to be. Turned out to be a Wolfenii. And it's got a really nice blue colour with some good red stems to it. So that, I'm very hopeful that that's a good selection. It's only a selection, you know, I could give it a name and call it something, but we have to be careful when we start doing things like that because we need to trial these things to make sure they're worthy of being brought to the market. There's too many plants out there that fail in the 3rd or 4th year and end up being very boring plants, but are sold as something else. Anyway, we'll not moan about that. Now this is a lovely sanguisorba, and what is it? I think to the top of the one there, it's probably 4 foot if that was stood in the air. The one thing I noticed yesterday while I was walking around was this bounces about lovely in the wind. So let's give you a little demonstration. It bounces like that, it's fantastic. So when the wind's blowing, it just gives a little nod to the garden. And this is Sanguisorba hacusinensis, and it's one called lilac squirrel. And it's a very long flower head, as you can see. I don't think that's focusing in properly as I'd like it to, but you kind of get the idea. There you go, it's kind of focused there. We're in a bit of shade here, so it's not focusing as I'd like it, but nevertheless, look at that. What a wonderful clump forming plant. So we'll go down this way, avoiding to my right the Japanese style border. I'm just looking at it now. Yeah, it looks really good. Honestly, I'm going to show you that at some point. And that's the telegraph pole pergola walk, or part of it. Looking good. Looking good. Looking good. Got a nice wisteria there called amethyst. It's starting to get some good growth now. Don't forget, I only put that in spring, I think, once this post went up. So probably March time. So in another couple of years, that will be all over this. I can't wait. This is an Acer. This is Acer Davidi. And it's one called Viper, and I show you this from time to time because I love the bark. It's a snake bark maple. You can see why from that. And it has these lovely, I don't think it shows as well at the moment because we're at a funny time of the year, but it has these lovely coral red sort of branchlets, I think I'll call them. And in winter they become more prominent, more pronounced, but we have to wait for that. And it's finally starting to hold this branch down. This is the branch that I tied up. Remember, I was having a go at creating a wonderful Japanese knot to hold it back because they're really good at it. And as you can see from that, I'm not very good at it. But it does the job. And that's helping to pull that branch over because it was going into the middle of the clump. And it's what I say all the time, that you've got to really help your plants. You can't just let them do what they want to do on some occasions or some instances, because you need to control that. Otherwise, it won't look great. I often get people saying to me about the shape of some of my shrubs and trees and how wonderful they are. And where could they buy one from like that? And I tell them, you can't. You've got to work on it. It takes a lot of hard work to do these things, to make them, to create them, to meld them into the shape you want, to give them that interesting look. Otherwise, they become, in some cases, congested in a way you don't want them to be. Whereas that, now you can see, it's got some lovely, distinct, upright branches there. And that's the kind of form it takes on anyway, but when this gets going properly, it'll end up being about probably 20 foot, hopefully. And the idea is, I want it to be forming a tunnel down here, so the branches will be allowed to come over. Obviously, I will clip some to create that tunnel, and eventually those will come over there and they will block some of your view, and that's what you should do. You should block some of the view of the garden anyway, because you've got to make it look interesting. You've got to make it so that people want to walk down it. So that's one way of doing it. Designer's trick, really. And then paths create interest and intrigue, and they take you places into the garden, and they kind of guide you. Not all paths guide you, but a majority do. So they look good. Very nice. This is Echinops venaticus Taplow Blue, and it's starting to open its flowers now. So they were seed heads, the originals, but they look great as a seed head. I love them. But then they produce this little tiny flower all the way round. Remember, with Echinops, they are very successful. They do seed around. So you need to be aware of that. But they do look good. So this is looking brilliant now. And they are really autumn colours. Let's get my shadow out of the way. Look at that. Doesn't that look interesting? And the seed heads, they look interesting as well. And that's Rheum australe, looking great. Next to it is a Deschampsia. So it's Deschampsia season. And this one looks really, really nice. That's good. It's the opium poppy. This one's a little bit sickly looking, in my opinion. Not great at all. But it's okay. So everything's looking great at the minute. So that's a nice sanguisaura. It's a white form called Beurre Blanc. A very nice one. Very clump forming as well. I've got several in this garden. China Cloaruba, look at that. Doesn't that look good? Just looks good in there. Another good reason for getting some grasses. Just to separate those plantings and to make the whole thing look more interesting. This is Achnophorum calamagrostis. Looking very nice. Those seed heads are great. Really, this needs a little area on its own to be at its best. But it still looks interesting in here. You got to be careful when you mix grasses together, because they can look a bit boring. But in this case, we've got two different types, so they look distinctly different. This is Lythrum, and it's Lythrum salicaria, and it's one called fire kurtz, that means fire candle. But the flowers are looking fantastic. It's coming into its best at the moment. There's loads of flowers still to come up and open. Loads, but it looks so good. You've got to stand back really to appreciate this one. There you go. Looks superb. Let's take a different angle as well. So that's it from a different angle. Looking very, very nice indeed. The boardwalk border is looking fantastic. Don't forget, the boardwalk border incorporates the dip pools, the wildlife dip pools, which are looking great. I'm getting on top of all that weed that was in there. We're finally getting there, making some sort of an impact. The Rheum's looking great. Although there are lots of dead bits in there, it's still sending up new leaves, which is good. One of the first echinaceas back there. Echinacea purpurea, that little purple one. I think you can probably split it. There it is. And then we've got the Aster Monk starting to come into flower. I love that one. It's all looking good. We've got a Monarda here that's new last year. It looked fantastic last year. And it's looking good again. In fact, we're going to get close to that. We're going to get a bit closer because I'm quite excited by this one. And the reason I'm excited by it is because it has a habit of doing this. That little section there. I don't know if others do that. My other Monardas don't do that, but this one does. And that's called Gewitterwolk, which I believe means storm cloud. So maybe that's representative of a storm cloud building. I don't know. But it's really nice. A very strong plant indeed. Definitely worth hunting out. Definitely worth hunting out. We've got a sanguisauber here that I can't wait to show you when it starts flowering. But it's not flowering yet, which is a shame. Oh, it's starting to set the flowers. There we go. They look good. So that'll be nice once it actually gets into its stride. Very strong and healthy plant as well. Very healthy clump. This plant here is very reminiscent of a eupatorium, but it's actually Vernonia. This one's Vernonia Arkansas. The New York ironweed, I think, is its common name. And behind it, we've got a crocosmia. The little red flower that you can see there is crocosmia. In fact, we'll go around and have a look at that. So I'm the other side of it now, quite close up, and I'm trying to get that to focus, but for some reason it doesn't want to focus. So I'll not waste too much time on that. But I actually like it before it flowers, before it puts them flowers out. To me, it has a more interesting look. And I'd put my money on that any day. Looks great. These were already here when we got here. They were all over. And I believe them to be Crocosmia lucifer, or seedlings of Lucifer, because they do tend to seed quite true. Oh, a little bit of damage on the Vernonia here. This is what we get with the wind. Now, the problem with that is that they produce the flowers on the end of those, and there you go, it's gone. So that's a flower lost, unfortunately. And that's gardening. You can't do out about it. You shouldn't do out about it. That's life. Cephalaria is looking good. See if we can get this one to focus in. Yep, there you go. That's very nice. Cephalaria gigantea. I'd be careful with this one because it does seed around. Very successful, that one. Very nice. So this section here is a path that I've left deliberately to maintain the hedge. This hedge was terrible when we first came here. It was probably 3 or 4 foot tall, all over the place, patchy, and I'm finally getting on top of it. Although I haven't done the top yet, I've managed to keep the side cut because we have visitors, so we need to keep full access, but it looks really good. So remember, paths are for access and for interest. And they look good, and this looks good. The cats run up and down that, believe it or not. It must be, I don't know, 200 foot long. Quite impressive, that. And this is a bit of an awkward border, really, because it can be in full sun in the morning, and then semi-shade, and then back to semi-shade. But it's coming on now, it's maturing lovely, and we're at the back of the shack here. So that's very nice. There we go, I've managed to focus the crocosmia for you. And that's what it's looking like at the moment. It looks fantastic. I've shot over to this border. And I paused it because I don't want you to see the Japanese style border still. Desperate not to. But I wanted to show you this. And this is now seeding. It's it's Cotinus young lady, but it's what's commonly known as the smoke bush. And when you see that, you can see why. It has a superb autumn colour, and then that lovely seed head look, which is supposed to look like smoke. And I guess if you've got a good imagination, yeah, maybe. But it looks great, but it is a very small, diminutive type of Cotinus. It can be kept in a pot, this one. It won't get very big, maybe 2 or 3 foot eventually. And that's pretty much it. I must show you this while we're here. So there's the plummy colour of the Miscanthus lutaria riparius that I told you it takes on at this time of year. And the sad geek in me came 2 days ago and took all the dead ones off. There are still some dead ones in there, as you can see, but I removed a lot of them because I like that look. And I reckon this is now 14 foot in the air. It's brilliant. You can't always see this very well when you're this close up. It doesn't do it justice because you need to see the whole thing. So we'll move back over to here, see if we can see it from here. Let's have a look. A little bit better, but you can't see all of it, it's that big. Plummy night, look at the clouds, they are really starting to form now. I thought we had a threat of rain today, and I think we have. I think it's going to rain. This is another digitalis, and this one's called Digitalis ferruginea. It looks very similar to Stewartii, but I can assure you it's not. So when those flowers actually make some sort of an appearance, I'll show you, and we can compare the two. See what you think. It's looking great now. Miscanthus doing well. And there's that acanthus, Acanthus mollis, and that is classed as a latifolious group. It's called Rouladen. Very nice one, a white one, very nice. A strong plant as well, and probably one of the tallest. Gets up to about 5 foot in its flower. Now my eupatoriums, skinny mini, this year are not doing as well as they've done in previous years. Although that's looking very healthy, it was way taller last year. And I've said this before, if you have a year where you've got a plant that's doing absolutely fantastic, I can almost guarantee that the following year it probably won't be as good. It'll have sort of spent itself, even if it's a perennial, but then the following year after that it should come back good again. That's what I found in my experience. Oh, the miscanthus behind's looking good. That plum colour just sets it off. I love it, but again, remember that one has to be contained. And this is the owl border we're looking at the minute. Why do I call it the owl border? Because there's a bronze owl up there. That looks great. Everything gets named on my garden, as you know. It just creates interest for that particular border. So we'll take a walk back this way. I can't show everything on every video, and I know I tend to go through some similar things each time, but because they're at the best. And this is one of them. I showed this the other day. And this one is Ligularia Borevii, and then the one behind it is a Liferum virgatum Dropmore Purple. And they look really, really good together. They're at the opposite end of the colour spectrum, so that's why they look so good together. And the leaf on the Ligularia is impressive. Now, there are some purple ones that are quite nice, and I do like them, but this, it has an altogether better form of leaf, in my opinion. I mean, most people wouldn't view that as nice, but I do. I like it. So it's looking good. So we'll go back past the Cloister Pergola. Oh, this looks good. Let's show you this while we're here. So you get this view from here of that Corylus. That's Corylus avellana contorta. And if you look back on my videos, you'll see one where I showed you how I made it look like that. It was a mature specimen already, so I was well made up when I saw it. And I cut away all the lower sections. But you're always left with these whips. So I've yet to remove those. I've removed lots of them. I hadn't seen those, surprisingly enough. Didn't see them. But they will be removed. Oh, I'm looking up at that sky in the background there. Oh, that's getting dark now. There's a shower certainly on its way. Let's show you this while we're here. This is a nice little combination. Lovely. Love that combination. And that's Anamanthele lesoniana, the grass. And it's seeding now. If you don't want that to overseed, now is the time to remove them. When you see the seed heads at this point, remove them, or you will get seeds everywhere, which I don't mind at all. There's another Calamagrostis here. I don't often show this one. This is Calamagrostis avalanche. A very nice one. It has that creamy stem and stalks within. So they are very, very nice indeed. It's yet to mature. It hasn't been in there long, but it's going to look good over time. A very nice one. So we'll move to this now. This is Rosa glauca. I like showing this every time because it's just such a good rose. Look at the colours in that. Wonderful. Love it. And luckily for you, we can now show you another flower. This does keep flowering throughout the year, and it produces a lovely hip here, and they go a lovely colour as autumn approaches. So it can be a lovely, interesting shrub, or it can be a small tree. And that is really nice, and that's the Himalayan musk rose. And it's very nice. I love the colour of that. I love the simplicity of that rose, actually. Let's move on. That hosta's doing well again. Then we're We've got another Deschampsia here. This one's called Gold Tow, and I think it's one of the best for longevity at least. And it's not even at its best yet. It's still growing. It'll push up at least another foot, and then it will have this lovely look once it actually pollinates itself, which is wind pollinated. And it's called Gold Tow because that means gold dew, and it does. It looks like gold. It looks like gold dew on the leaves when it, at certain times of the day. That is. It's very nice. Yes, these ones can seed all over the place. Dead easy to spot. They're so distinctive in the little clumps and easy to remove. And I urge you to remove any that you find, because otherwise you'll end up with a multitude of different Deschampsias and probably not the original you started with. Let's give you a quick look at that. That's the quarry tile path, looking really good now. And then I'm going to go on to describe this now. Now, the person that contacted me said that theirs was looking terrible. The flower heads or the seed heads were still green, and that it was falling to bits. That's what it does. Unfortunately, that's part of the beauty of this plant. It starts off with green seed heads. So these seed heads will start green, very green. Then they open to this fluffy look. So that look there, they open up to that, and they have more purple tinges. These are a bit further on, so the purple's gone out of it. Then they close back up to this. This is closed back up now, them particular ones. So they're all closed. Then what they'll do, over time, they will go more upright. All of them will go more upright, stiffly upright, and turn into a straw colour, and remain that right through to February, when I would cut them back down of the following season. Now, a couple of failings this plant has. One is it is prone to rust on the leaf, as you can see, but don't let that put you off, because it also produces a very, very nice green leaf when it first comes up, and I think you can just make that out. But it has a very nice green clump forming look. And the other failing is that when we get some heavy winds, we get this kind of thing. So it bends them and it snaps them. And all you do is just remove them. Don't be afraid of removing them, or you'll end up with lots of crossing seed heads, which you don't want. I think the lady had said that they were relatively new. You need to give them time. They need to mature. Just give them time and it'll be fine. But that's why we buy them at this time of the year, for that look. As they get stiffer, they become less like that. So if you look at some of my old videos, you'll see how beautiful that can look when the wind's blowing. Whereas this one here, which is Calamagrostis Waldenbusch, it becomes very stiff at this point, and it doesn't have much of a sway, he says, as it starts swaying. But Calamagrostis calforster kind of has the edge on that, does really well. So I'm going to finish here. This is a bit of a wildlife area, not going to describe all the plants, but they're looking very nice. The one I will describe is this one here, and this one's Eupatorium cannabinum, a beautiful, beautiful wild form of Eupatorium. I love it. I love it. It's just really good. And if you like butterflies and bees, get yourself this one. It never stops attracting them. And then flowers are just starting to come out now, so they will look really good. We're in the orchard border area at the minute, and that border is looking really, really good. And I mentioned on the last video about Cirsium. This is Cirsium tuberosum. I mentioned that it has this type of flower with the purple tip to it, if it focuses. It's not very good at that. There we go. So there you go, that's focusing. And then it has that type of leaf, which is very, very similar to this one. And people do get confused because they think they're the same plant. They're not. This one has a lot broader leaf, a shorter plant. That one has a lot skinnier leaf, very similar in the pointed toothed look, but not the same. And then this one produces those flowers, which are very similar, which is why it confuses people. But you can see, if you look at that seed head or flower head, it's less pointy and it will become white. Whereas this one, you can see, there's a more distinctive shape to it. Wonderful. Delphinium requenii is looking good. Look at that, it looks great. Look at that moody sky. That really is building up to something. So this is finally looking good, and that's Anthemis tinctoria EC Buxton, looking great, but needs support. I've said this many times, try and put it in between other plants, give it that support, it will flop. And finally I notice that this is finally flowering. I'm trying to get into a point where I can, there we go. So that's Actaea racemosa. Look at that, is that not wonderful? And the seed heads are finally starting to show their flowers, which I feared it would never happen, but it has. So we'll end there, and hope you've enjoyed that little tour. So I'm quite happy to answer all questions. Just fire away at me. If I can answer them, I will. I hope you've enjoyed that journey. Bit of a long one again, but it's that time of year where we can get away with doing long journeys because we've got so much to show you. Okay, I'll talk to you on the next one. Ta-da.